So I do have sort of a theme or a topic that I would like to present, and it's King's Dream is MAGA's Nightmare. All right, and so I want to start off with a question for us to reflect on, and that is, given in fact what Donovan presented, the setbacks and the rollbacks of social justice, economic justice, and personal freedoms, this onslaught, right? This blitzkrieg of of policies that are just blowing up the road of progress. Given all of that, is it even relevant to talk about Dr. King's dream? And obviously, it's a bit of a rhetorical question. And my response is yes, it's very relevant. And so I want to discuss why it's relevant and why it's significant. And to do that, I got three sort of points that I want to present to you, and then perhaps we can have a discussion around it. The first thing is that my conclusion of the matter is that MAGA exists because of King's dream. All right, and so I want to talk about these 3 points that I hope will contextualize what I'm saying and why I'm saying it, and prove it to be true to a certain degree and motivate you to take action in certain ways. So we're going to talk about what King's dream is very briefly, and we'll get into what happened when King's dream began to manifest itself in politics, in our social lives, and in economic policies. And then how does all of this tie into Donald Trump? And so without any further ado, let me go there right now. So let's talk about King's dream. On the one hand, King's dream was a personal conviction. He's a man that decided to take action at the prompting of other people in his African American community and his spiritual community, because he saw what was happening to individuals that was not right for him. And this dream, this personal dream, he had, very local intentions. Like, how do we stop what's going on, all the bad stuff, with people that I'm immediately associated with? And I like to bring out the personal dream first, because it usually starts when we take on an action or when we adopt an ideology. We see ourselves as a participant in the drama or the saga that we begin to act in and act on. And so there was a personal conviction there. But King realized that his personal conviction extended, his personal dream extended into the American dream. And when he articulates his dream via his dream speech, we can hear him grabbing from the Declaration of Independence, grabbing from the Gettysburg Address, grabbing from the Constitution. And there's something about King's dream that's not just his own dream and his friend's dream, but we realize it's part of the larger American dream. When, Thomas Jefferson is writing out these grand words of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all men, King is pulling on that. He's not in disagreement with this dream that America is putting forth. But the issue is that King doesn't stop there. It's not just an American dream. It's not just for citizens of America. It's a human dream. And so King also had a global element to this dream. He wasn't just concerned with what was happening in Selma, in Chicago, but also in Palestine, also in South America, also in the various countries in Africa during the 60s that were still under European rule since the Berlin Conference. So I think what's really important to fully embrace what King's dream is all about, because for me, when I do that, it helps me to see whether it's still around. How do we test it to see if it made any change, and if it's worth our time. So one of the elements of King's dream, I want to list some of the ingredients that come out of these different tiers of King's dream, his personal dream. there we see him understanding personal freedoms. Some of his dear friends and ministers and soldiers and generals were part of what we would call the LGBTQ community right now. And that didn't stop him from embracing them. Because for him, every human being is entitled to justice and the equal opportunity to live life as a decent human being, to be happy in his own way. Yes, King was a religious man. King followed the Bible. But for him, he understood the Bible as a pursuit of justice. To live out the Bible is to live out justice. And he understood how that fits in terms of who gets to police other people. And so King understood that it is not our job to police people, it's our job to inspire people, to help people, to find their choices and find their understanding the meaning of life. Not for him to shove it down someone's throat. Because our concern is to love our neighbor like ourselves, like we love ourselves. And King took that. So we have King, which a lot of present day Republicans reject or overlook, embracing an array of personal freedoms insofar that they're not harmful to others. The American dream, we have King here embracing democracy. How do we understand the task of the government? What is the role of the government vis-a-vis the individual? So for King, this rugged individualism, which is in a sense for him a hypocritical idea, because the whole idea of the rugged individualism that is used to counter King's sort of embrace of what many may call socialism, is that white America has always leveraged the government on his behalf. In fact, in the preamble of the Constitution, we hear that it's the government's job to promote the social welfare of its citizens. And one can only remember the different policies that enabled those who were entitled to have first-class citizenship, free land from the government, free resources to go to school. And so King understood that this issue of the American dream, while it's a noble idea, in practice, it's not working. And so part of King's dream is not just individual freedoms and predilections and different tastes and in your style and your lifestyle, but it's also consequential in terms of American politics. How does democracy perform? Who is allowed to participate in the discussions at the table regarding the distribution of power and resources? Along with democracy, pluralism is a big part of King's dream. Because not only did King embrace people with various sexualities, different interests, he also embraced people of various religions. He was arm in arm with Muslims, Sikhs, Jews, atheists. So King was also on the track of pluralism, not just democracy. And I will add here, and there's many more elements of this dream. King, most people like to talk about near the end, he was focusing on the economic side of his activism. And socialism comes to mind. How do we take care of the least of thee in our communities? And if we add that in, King's dream extends not just from the personal freedoms, religious freedoms, but also economic freedoms, right? So we have all of these things mixed up. It's just mixed in this bowl of justice, I would say. And I'm going to stop here because I think that's enough for us to keep in mind what King was all about, what his words were aiming at. And so I want to go to the second point, and that is King's dream gave birth to some successes. The Civil Rights Act dismantled Jim Crow legally, which allowed for African Americans to participate more fully in the social programs that were benefiting people who enjoyed white privilege. My mother she's a participant in that history. In the 60s, she was able to go to college. She came from Georgia, and she used to tell me about all the colored signs that I see on TV, but she literally seen and touched colored signs. And she told me that day when she found out that she can go to school and get funding just like people did when, they got the GI Bill. And so she went to school. So my mom is a benefactor, a beneficiary of the dream. The Voting Rights Act. The historian Carol Anderson, in her book White Rage, talks about how prior to the Civil Rights Act, in states like Alabama, about less than 10% on average of black people were able to vote. Immediately in 1965, when that thing was passed, within that year, more than 50% of black people were registered to vote. Later in that year, also in 1965, we have the Immigration Nationality Act, which tore down the biased quotas set for people to come to America and establish themselves and take a crack at getting the American dream. And that opened up to Southern European countries that were discriminated against, and particularly South American countries, right? Let's not forget the Loving versus Virginia case of 1967 that allowed for black and white people to love each other without fear of punishment, retribution. The Fair Housing Act of 1968, after he had passed. And these are just a few of the more notable ones. These are manifestations of King's dream. So this gets to the second point. King's dream awakened a response. This response among historians is known as the Conservative Revolution. When Nixon runs, he's running a campaign which some of us know as the Southern Strategy. We need to put a halt to this. In fact, Nixon would say that, hey, you guys got all you want. You guys, in fact, have too much. So what his administration began to do is try to roll back the Voting Rights Act, to roll back affirmative action, things that we're hearing today happening. As soon as they were implemented, people tried to sabotage them. I don't have time, but when I do have time, I usually like to show people the electoral map. And when you get a chance, look at the electoral map of Nixon's and Reagan's victories. It looked like someone squirted ketchup all over the country. Nixon and Reagan won the largest electoral gains in history, along with Lyndon Johnson and FDR. And I like to show this map because this is showing an overwhelming agenda that white America had. So you pair up Nixon's rhetoric with the kind of support he received, we get to see what Nixon was responding to, and he was responding to King's dream. Reagan as well. Reagan's strategy was similar to the Southern strategy, but it was a little bit more in economic terms. Many of us know that Reagan actually, he's known, his claim to fame is pretty much, dealing the death blow to unions, and lifting jobs out of the states to overseas, and also cracking down on opportunities to get federal jobs, which predominantly impacted the black community, which relied on getting on federal government jobs, teaching, being part of unions. That was sort of our fast track to the middle class. Both Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan aligned their strategies in their rhetoric to undermine the gains that were made after the civil rights movement. Now, this is important because one would think King's dream was dead by then. I mean, if you look at a place like Harlem, where I'm from, Harlem is, when I grew up in Harlem, I only seen abandoned buildings. My beach were sidewalks filled with crack vials. That was my sand. And that's all I knew of Harlem. Once in a while, you'll run into a vestige of the Harlem Renaissance. And, as I gotten older, I just realized, like, man, this is what it is to live in a black community, until I started learning a little bit of history. And I learned that black life used to thrive here. I'm walking down the same streets of James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington. I literally live on Sugar Hill. But after that decimation of the black urban community, and Harlem is not the only one. You have Chicago and Detroit, on, Atlanta. You would think that the black dream that black people held for themselves to get equality and gain equality was gone. But slowly but surely, there was something growing. In the words of Tupac, a black rose growing through the concrete. I think they named that rose Barack Obama. And this gets to my third point. Barack Obama is a birth child of that civil rights movement, that King's dream. So much so, I love to tell this story real fast. In 1966, Sammy Davis Jr. went to Overton, Florida, to give a performance. And he was excited because he was saying, hey, we just got these Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act passed. Boy, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it all the way to the promised land. But immediately after those acts were passed, there were tons of riots. Some black folks who were still trying to vote. Some were stone hitting the head with rocks. And at this concert, there's a nice recording. I don't have time, but there's a recording that I have of Sammy Davis Jr. taking time out to encourage people, because they were saying the same thing that many of us are saying right now. All this work, and it's just gone. Things are worse than they were before. That Voting Rights Act was passed, but it ain't getting us nothing. We got people still getting shot up, dying. What happened? We still can't get no jobs. Sammy Davis Jr. says, listen, hold up a second. Right now, there might be some young kid about 5 years old who in 50 years can possibly be president. Now, what's interesting about that is, so Obama was born in 61. This is 66. It's almost prophetic. Obama would be 5 years old, but he's all the way in Hawaii or Egypt. And so what Sammy Davis Jr. was talking about is the crack in the concrete of racism that was opened up. The possibilities that were opened up. The legislative, the electoral possibilities. And he was saying, be ready for that and act on that. And in almost 50 years, Obama was born a little early according to Sammy Davis Jr.'s numbers. Obama, 50 years would have been 2016, but Obama came out in 2008. And he becomes the first black president. History shows that his opportunity to become the first black president is directly attached to the possibilities, the protections of the 14th and 15th Amendments that the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act created. Because before Obama, there was the Harold Washingtons now, the Carl Stokes, the Andrew Youngs, the Shirley Chisholms, who were able to just push the road a little further, to lay that brick down, to lay that track down a little further. And when Obama becomes president, having already made history, being the 5th black senator in history in 2004, talking about working twice as hard, when he becomes president, we celebrate it and we rejoice. But lo and behold, there was another birth child by the name of Donald J. Trump, who is directly in the lineage of the backlash to King's Dream. Too many immigrants. Roll back the 1965 immigration and nationality quotas. Affirmative action, not fair. Roll back affirmative action from the Civil Rights Movement. Not only that, during Obama's presidency in 2013, we have the Holder, Shelby versus Holder case, Shelby County versus Holder, which gutted the heart of the Voting Rights Act. Many still are not aware that the Voting Rights Act, the heart of it has been brought out. The heart of it is simply, there are certain states proven to play games with the voting requirements, right? Setting up rules at the last minute, moving the DMV, all these things, right? Making it hard for people to vote. So there was a pre-clearance requirement. So any state that wanted, certain states on this list that wanted to update its rules and regulations and requirements to vote had to submit it to the federal government, to the Department of Justice, so that it can be reviewed. It was gutted in 2013. So immediately when we see the emergence, you're talking about a dream. This is something that even in his wildest dreams, Marcus Garvey thought was never possible. Marcus Garvey writes in his text, the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey, that it would be a vain hope to think that there would someday be a Negro in the seat of the highest administration. In other words, the reason why he wanted to pack up and go, because he felt like we would never make gains politically, so we should go. That's why he wanted to go. Otherwise, he embraced Western politics and the idea of a president being a great leader. He saw how he would like dress all in his suits and his hat majestically, almost like he's George Washington coming down from winning the Revolutionary War. He embraced all of it and read all of this stuff. So when my time is running up soon, so the point I want to make here is that right when we get this extraordinary feat, this extraordinary victory, this extraordinary expression and manifestation of King Dream, we get what we see as our worst nightmare: Donald Trump. But Donald Trump didn't come out of anywhere. And I'm going to end on a few points to make. In 2012, Senator Lindsey Graham said, after Romney lost to Obama, McCain lost, the classic Republican who was in the military, he lost. And then you get the economic, businessman, he lost. It's like, how are we going to beat Obama? Lindsey Graham called it. He says, we need more angry white guys. You can look this up, to win. We need more angry white guys to vote. And that sat with me for a long time, because it showed that all of the gains that we were making were put together was a nightmare. Was a nightmare. There would have been no Trump probably without a President Obama. And so I just want to recap what I'm trying to express in so few words is that King's dream was successful. It made a lot of progress, not the ultimate progress, right? We're not in the Garden of Eden, okay? We haven't rebuilt Jerusalem or anything like that, but it set the tracks for progress. That progress in turn catalyzed a resistance. But even that resistance form, King Dream continued. And we see it in the form of Obama. I like to say Obama, but really more technically speaking, we see it in the increase in black voter turnout and the power of the black vote. That's really what we're seeing. And that's the reason why the Voting Rights Act is gutted and all these other affirmative actions and DEI things and critical race theory is being gutted so that we can not understand this. When Obama is elected, Carol Anderson writes an amazing text called White Rage. And the chapter that's really important for me was how to erase a presidency. And she documents how they didn't just want to beat Obama, they're trying to erase the legacy of Obama, which is attached to the legacy of the dream. And what this means in conclusion is that King's dream is still here. How do we know? Because we see the response to it. And that evidence should remind us that we have been doing something right. And there's a part of King that if I have a second, I don't know if maybe we can bring it up, but I was hoping I could share a screen. In his text, Where Do We Go From Here? King basically tries to remind us that, one, there's going to be a backlashes. He called it a white lash. Two, progress is not a straight line. It curves, it winds. Sometimes you get somewhere and I don't know if you've ever been on a highway and you got to come back around because there's a roadblock there and you could spend extra time riding somewhere just to get back to your destination. And the reason why this is important for us is because we are on the right path. We are doing something right, and it's important for us to keep that in mind and not lose heart, not just let go. And maybe, there's something about this I can embrace as a chess player. When I started playing chess, one thing about chess is that when I move, my opponent is going to move. I don't just move 3 times in a row like checkers. So I know when I make a move, my opponent's going to try to stop what I'm doing and make their move and try to win. And this is the mindset, that I have when I think about politics and history. And in many ways, it shows itself to be that way. And so in conclusion, here's some action steps that I recommend. One, we have to keep in mind that King's dream is still here. We are all products of King's dream, one way or another, just for the fact that we are disappointed about Trump. Or two, we see that there's much more to do. And as Donovan is saying, how do we figure out ways to close the gap and inform? So one, we got to keep voting. That's under attack. That's one of the biggest contributions of King's dream. Two, we got to keep growing individually, intellectually, and morally, because it is up to us to set the standard, right? If we want to heal the country, then we have to be the medicine. So if the country is falling into ignorance, then we have to nourish it with education. And then, ultimately, and I think this kind of connects with what Donovan was saying, we have to find ways, just like Dr. Bembry is doing, to build bridges and networks and create our allies, strengthen each other, and encourage each other. Because if we take a real good look at history, Trump is not the worst president we ever had before. There are some presidents who had over 300 slaves. There are some presidents who are known, infamous for the Trail of Tears. So they may have gotten the first down, but the game ain't over. All right. So that's what I have for us as a word of, reflection on King's Dream, what it's all about, and also inspiration to understand its power and to explore creative ways in using and leveraging it to change the world, to pursue justice. And that's that. Thank you very much.